everyone, it's Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. So this video is obviously going to be about all the books that I read in the month of April, which was apparently a huge reading month for me. Genreathon happened in it, and a lot of work happened, which sometimes means that I can read a lot, and sometimes it means I can read, like, not at all. This month happened to be one of those months where I could just kind of get away with reading a lot while I was at work, so I read 12 books this month. That's a lot of books. So I'm just gonna get into them. The first book that I got to this month is Rebel of the Sands by Alwyn Hamilton. I was really excited to get to this book. This is a fairly new release that everybody's talking about. Look how pretty the cover is. This book was advertised that if you didn't like The Wrath and the Dawn, you would love this. I might be in the minority here. I still liked The Wrath and the Dawn a lot better, but I'm also one of those people who really liked that book, which I know got mixed reviews. But this book is very similar in that it's told in kind of a Arabic style, or at least culture based on Arabic culture. This book is pretty much about a girl who lives in a town where women are kind of married off as a commodity or a business arrangement, and our main character is a tough, gun-wielding girl who wants nothing to do with that. So she kind of happens to run off with this handsome foreigner that shows up in her town, and all of their adventures through the desert with a whole bunch of fantastical creatures and some government overthrowing that could potentially be building. This book is pretty much what you want in a less than 400-page YA fantasy. The world development and character development was paced really well, and I feel like very satisfied by reading this book because I feel like I got a lot out of it, but I don't think that it was actually amazing. I feel like there was a lot of insta-love in it, and I feel like the plot twist was fairly predictable. It's a very standard YA storyline as far as pacing goes for the whole story. I liked the mystical aspect to it. I really liked the creatures. I want a Baraki so badly, and I really like the really tough female character without being too over the top. So I really like that aspect. I like the characters. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sure if I'm gonna continue with the series, just based off how much I'm not really remembering even for this wrap-up video. But nonetheless, it was an enjoyable read while I was reading it, and I'm gonna recommend this if you want a very pretty standardly paced, like 350-page YA fantasy. I gave this 3 stars. The next book that I want to talk about is a book that I'm having a very hard time describing to people, but it's a book that I'm recommending to a lot of people, and at the same time, not recommending to a lot of people. That book is Grasshopper Jungle by Andrew Smith. And look, I mean, well, okay, look at the cover. The pages are also yellow, which is cool. This book is a special species of book that needs to be, like, studied or something. This is the epitome of Andrew Smith, in my opinion. He is weird and strange. I don't know what he was smoking when he wrote this book, but it turned out amazing, in my opinion. Okay. The basic story of this book is it's set in a very rural town in Iowa, and it focuses around a boy and his friend and girlfriend, and how the end of the world comes to be in the form of huge, indestructible praying mantis creatures. That's all I can really describe this book as. In this book, I don't think I have ever read the words horny, sperm, or balls more in my life and been more okay with it. It's one of those books, it's set in the headspace of, like, a 16-year-old guy who is completely hormone-driven, and every single thing reminds him of sex, and it's in there. I mean, you are in his head, so you see how weird stuff can just trigger a weird, horny thought in a teenage guy. I really like that Andrew Smith doesn't really censor that in any way. It's extremely realistic in that the end of the world is happening with crazy, scary, huge, like 6-foot praying mantis bugs. And sadly, that's put on the back burner to any sort of hormone-driven thought that this boy experiences. And I really liked that concept because it doesn't take itself too seriously, and there's all this crazy stuff happening, but you're just kind of focused on his relationship with his girlfriend, his relationship with his friend, any sort of sexual identity that he is kind of discovering about himself. I just really, really liked this book. It's not going to be for everybody. Again, it's obviously very graphic when it comes to teenage horniness, and there is a lot of sexual discovery that happens in this that I did not expect. And I just really enjoyed the characters in this, the bizarre story. I mean, if you're going into an Andrew Smith novel, you're gonna know that you're gonna get some weird stuff. This was just everything that I wanted to be. I gave this 4 stars. Just, yeah. The next 4 books that I got to, I'm actually gonna leave a link down to my Genrethon wrap-up video to try and keep this video in a reasonable time frame, but I go into thorough detail discussing the 4 books that I read in that, which were Undeniable by Bill Nye, which is phenomenal. I gave that 4 stars. I also read Bone Gap, which is also up there as far as very strange and interesting stories. I also really liked that and gave that 4 stars. I read Codename Verity, which I have kind of controversial opinions about as far as how well loved this book goes. I gave it 4 stars nonetheless, but I definitely have differing opinions from everybody else on this book. And I also read Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson, which I loved and gave it 4 stars. I have recently updated that to 5 stars. So if you want to check out my thoughts on any of those books, I will leave that video linked down below. The next book that I got to is Let's Pretend This Never Happened, also by Jenny Lawson. This did not fall into that wrap-up video just because I read it after that week, but I wanted to continue on with Jenny Lawson's writing because it is phenomenal and hilarious, and I gave this 5 stars. Jenny Lawson is one of those people who can make really heavy, depressing stories about anxiety and severe depression and mental illness hilarious, and I laughed through the whole thing. Both of her books I'm gonna highly, highly recommend. She just has a way with words, and I am going to forever follow her blog and read everything that she writes just because it's one of those books where you will laugh through the entire thing. I also read The Glittering Court by Rochelle Mead. This is a book that was very hyped. A lot of people are reading it because it just came out, and it fell a little flat for me. This just may not be my cup of tea as far as books go. It's very reminiscent of the Selection series. This book is told like historical fiction, but it's in a fantasy world. Nothing fantastical really happens other than it just being not Earth, basically. It's about a high society girl who is pretty much sick of that life and does not like the idea of being married off to a distant cousin just as kind of a business transaction to keep her family name. So she trades place with her maid, who has the opportunity to go into the Glittering Court, which is pretty much a program that these men set up to bring up lower level women into nobility status, basically, and they have the opportunity at the end of their training in etiquette in nobility stuff to be married off to a high bidding man, like a governor or a high paid merchant. And it's basically her going through that process and learning about life outside of the high society that she is accustomed to. And obviously there's going to be some love and romance and a little bit of adventure, not that much. I personally just didn't really like the characters that much. I did not mesh well with Adelaide, our main character. I didn't really like her. I give this 2 stars. I just don't really like reading that many books about frilly dresses and ball gowns and nothing else really happening. That being said, I am also not a fan of Jane Austen, so don't go off my word on that. If you like books like that, I'm gonna highly recommend this to you because it was a very satisfying read. I liked the conclusion. The next 2 books in the series are going to be told from the perspectives of her 2 friends, which I liked a lot more, so I actually might pick those up because I liked their stories a lot more than hers. So those are my thoughts on The Glittering Court. Kind of controversial, I know. And the next 4 books, I am also going to leave a link down to a video that I just discussed. I read 4 books in a row, completely unplanned, that were very, very strong female empowerment stories. All very, very different and all very satisfying. The first one being Exit Pursued by a Bear by E.K. Johnston. I 5-starred the crap out of this book. I loved this book. This is a very strong trigger warning for rape, but this book handles it in such a way that has not been done before in YA, and she is one of the strongest characters I have ever read from, and I just think this book is phenomenal and that a ton of people should be reading it. I then read Saint Anything by Sarah Dessen. It was heartwarming, and her books are so dang wholesome that they're always enjoyable. She always has a really good blend of friends and family and romance. It's just all very equal in her books, and I really like that. It's a very satisfying and well-rounded read. So I gave this 3 stars. I then read Since You've Been Gone by Morgan Matson, and this is my first Morgan Matson book, and I really liked it. I gave this 3 stars. It's definitely a summer book if you're looking for the, like, epitome of YA contemporary summer reads. It's definitely this book. The last book that I got to is The Sacred Lies of Minnow Bly by Stephanie Oakes. This book is phenomenal. I gave this 5 stars. It's about a girl who escapes a fanatical religious cult who cut off her hands, and she's being tried for a brutal beating of a boy and the murder of the prophet, and it's about her story leading up to that point and her time spent in a juvenile detention center, and basically learning how to cope with coming into her own control of her own life and her own power, and that life is not what the cult told her to be. It has amazing ethics and morality in the story. It makes you question everything, and it just makes you sit back and think about life and death and faith and religion and ethics and morals. It's just, oh, it's one of those books. So I gave that 5 stars. Okay, and those are all of the books. So I will leave both of those videos linked down below if you would like to see more of my thoughts on those. I read a lot. I hope you guys had a really good reading month, and I hope you guys are reading some amazing books right now, and I will see you guys in my next video.